This is Julia Widdop, and we have with us today Skip Press, who has written a great book on screenwriting, and I'll just let Skip tell you more about it.
Well, okay. I wrote the Complete Idiot's Guide to Screenwriting not because I thought I was the greatest screenwriter. You know, I've sold a bunch of screenplays, and I've had a lot of them picked up. I've written for television, but I was asked to write it after I was the author of about 3 different versions of a book called The Writer's Guide to Hollywood, Producers, Directors, and Screenwriters Agents. And then later I wrote a book called The Ultimate Writer's Guide to Hollywood. And, I've been around Hollywood a long time, and I knew a lot about a lot of different story structures and some other structures of things, including the Elliott wave, which is revived by Robert Crector Jr., and who wrote a book about something he calls socionomics. And so anyway, I looked at all the other books on screenwriting out there, and I realized that there were a lot of things that just were not covered, that weren't covered at all. And so I thought, okay, they want me to write the book, I'll write it. And so I wrote the first version, and some guy at the Writers Guild of Canada picked up on it and said it was the best book for beginning screenwriters out there. And a large part of the structure, incorporated Campbell, and I'd read The Hero of a Thousand Faces a long time ago, and many of the other books, and I saw a parallel between writers and trying to make it and the hero's journey. So I remarked on that, I commented on that. And Chris Vogler, who is a friend of mine because of being in this guru world of Hollywood stuff, which I never intended to do, but you sort of fall into it, I talked to Chris about how he, became famous for touting Campbell, and he told me this story of how he'd been working at Disney at the time when Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg were running it, and how he had kept telling Katzenberg, look, this Joseph Campbell stuff, this is really good. And Katzenberg would go, nah, forget it. Just do research on the movies. And so finally he wrote a 12-page memo on everything, how the writer's journey worked, which was his later book, but how the hero's journey worked. And Katzenberg flipped out over it, and he wanted all of the Disney movies to be gauged against this particular story matrix. And I think the first one that sort of got run through that mix was Aladdin, which did extremely well. And so thereafter they kept doing that, and that's when Disney started to boom again. So there's a real universality to these story structures and Campbell's thing. And of course, that Lucas said he could not have written Star Wars. He couldn't have finished Star Wars if not for The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So all of that went into the mix of the writing of my first version of the screenwriting book.
Great, yeah, I read all that stuff about, and I read his book, Chris Vogler's book. Yeah.
So, after that, I did a second version of the book, and then I did a third version. When I was doing the second version, I was trying to, on the side, write a romantic comedy screenplay. And I noticed that I couldn't come up with a mentor figure, you know? And then I realized that every story doesn't fit the hero's journey, you know? Everyone's not going to go on a big journey that changes things drastically or bring back an elixir for people, you know. Maybe they'd like to think they will, but most people, well, I don't know, maybe not most people, but all too many people are just content to sort of sit back and try to live their best life they can and not risk too much, not put it all on the line. And, you know, and that's common of everybody because in the Campbell world, the hero's always reluctant. Wants to stay in the normal world, you know? So
most do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But I think it's a more exciting story or do you disagree with that it's a more exciting story if it follows that?
Oh, yeah, I think it's proven over and over and over that it's a more exciting story if it follows it. That's why all these movies have success, is because they do follow that particular story structure. And, you know, but you got to remember Campbell was during the Depression, when the Depression started is when he got out of college and he couldn't get a job. So he you know, he had a little family money and he had a cabin in the woods or something like that, and he went and studied the great stories and religions and myths of the earth for 5 years, and that's where he saw the pattern, you know. So most people who achieve great success, I think, do follow the hero's journey pattern, because they're reluctant to. Quite often, people end up in a different career or a slightly different place than they expected starting out. You know, like Stephen King wanted to write westerns. You know, like Louis L'Amour, and you know, look where he ended up. You know, and Campbell even didn't set out to change the world with the writers. I mean, with the hero's journey, he was teaching at Sarah Lawrence, you know, in near New York City, and one of his students had a dad who was a publisher. And she liked the class, and she said, this class should be a book. And he said, well, okay. You know?
That's how he wrote the Hero with 1,000 Faces?
That's how it began, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was a girls' school at the time, and I think males are allowed now, have been for some time. But it was a girls' school, and so there was Joseph Campbell, with these admiring young females, and he was teaching them these great stories, and a girl said, hey, my dad's a publisher. You know, you should write a book about this. You know, and that's something I do constantly, all the time. I ghostwrite books for people. I teach people how to write books. I've been teaching writing for 20 years, and I'm constantly doing that. I say, you know, you could be a hero with your own life, with your own story, you know. This might mean something to somebody, and often enough they think, well, you know, I've lived it. It's not such a big deal. Anybody can do it. And then I sort of point out to them, some people, well, no, everyone can't do it, and maybe you should tell them how it might help people out, you know. And then once they finish the book and publish the book, they come back, people love it, people say, thank you so much for telling your story. I was hoping somebody would say something like that. My story's similar. And then they find out they're kind of like that hero that came back who has some kind of elixir, you know?
They have a message for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So later, when I did, as I was doing the third edition of the Complete Idoit's Guide to Screenwriting, I was introduced to the Elliott wave. Are you familiar with that?
No, I made a note of it when you mentioned that earlier.
Okay, well, let me, what it is, it's ELLIOTT, wave.com. And it was a pattern, just like Campbell discovered a pattern of stories, it was a pattern of a stock market fluctuation that was discovered by a fellow named Ralph Elliott back in the 1920s. And he was a management consultant who went around telling people how to construct and run successful tea parlors when they were all the rage back then.
I never knew they were ever the rage.
Yeah, they were the rage, tea parlors, Sunday teas and, discussions and things like that, right?
Oh, okay.
So, as I read this book, I found out that, and the guy that brought it all back that wrote the book is a financial advisor named Robert Prechter Jr. So as I read about Ralph Elliott, I discovered that when I came to Los Angeles in 1974, I had lived in the same house that Ralph Elliott had been living in when he developed the Elliott Way. It was a strange coincidence,
Yeah.
And and on Beacon Street near downtown Los Angeles. So as I looked into the Elliott Wave, it's got this two-part structure. It's a wave is a line, so there's a line up, a line down, a line up, a line down, a line up. And that five-parter constitutes a bull market in stock market terms. And then there's a corrective wave, which is one down, one up, one down. And that's the bear market. And you put those together, and it's called a cycle. So, but in the five-parter, the bull market, I saw a parallel between Joseph Campbell's material, Aristotle's 3 acts from Poetics, beginning, middle, and end, which has been around, had 2,000 years or whatever, and also Shakespeare's 5 acts. And so the story, bones, I guess we could call it, are still pretty much the same, but it allowed me to align all of those together so that they're really not in conflict. And so that's what I put in the third edition of the screenwriting book. And I gave a lecture about it at Pepperdine about 3 years ago, and incorporated a lot of other things in it as well. And it was the highlight, I was told, of an entrepreneur weekend at Pepperdine. Yeah, and it's on my website, skippress.com, under events. You can see it. And in the audience was Chris Vogler. And Chris came up to me afterwards, and he was, said, "Wow, it's amazing how you put all these things together." And I said, it all started with the Campbell stuff and some of our discussions, and Aristotle, and it all just kind of weaves together if you keep digging. I mean, it's the same thing that Campbell did. He kept seeing these patterns and what some people would think are diverse religions and philosophies and stories. But in the human condition, we go through much the same things, time after time. And I think if people study these materials, they start to see this, and they start to see that others are struggling in the same way, that it's possible to succeed when they think they might not be able to. And they get a glimpse, an idea of the barriers they'll come up against. And so when those barriers arrive, they're not flummoxed. They go, "Oh, well, I see what that is, yeah, And so now it's a reversal, and so I've got to do this, and I think it helps people live a better life, and I think we're all busy still sorting out how it all works.
So would you say that the wave, the stock market model, that would be the same, would fit in the road of trials and tribulations?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you how I put it together. I don't have a chart with me printed out, but it's on my website. Anybody can go see it. So the first line is a line up, okay, and you can compare that to initiation or something. It's like when the original Star Wars movie starts. I can use that one. Or I can use my favorite's Castaway with Tom Hanks, because I think it's got all of these things together. Let me use Castaway for a little more reason. So. Or I can talk about both of them. It starts off, it's a line up, okay? And then it hits a point, and that's the middle of Act 1. And in the middle of Act 1 is where the hero sort of meets a mentor. It's a decision point. It's like the place where Luke goes to see Obi-Wan, and Princess Leia, the hologram, pops out of this little robot. Luke just wants the normal life on his little planet there, and he's got this robot, and he's not really trying to live an extraordinary life, but there's this decision point. And the actual theme of the story and what the whole thing is all about is revealed right there in the middle of Act 1. And so it's one line up, right? And then you've got a line that goes down, and when at the bottom of that second line, and these are the first two waves of the Elliott wave, is the departure. It's the departure from the common world to the new world, and so it's kind of a downer, if you think about it. I mean, okay, Luke, well, you were just sort of like gathering robots for your uncle. Now you have to go be the hero of the rebel force against the giant empire. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, why not? It'd be fun. How many ways can they kill me? That's why you get a reluctant hero. And that's one of the points where people get stuck that you're talking about. It's not just the sirens. It's just like, oh my God, I don't have to do this. I don't have to put myself through this. Oh no,
And how did that happen in Castaways? I'm trying to think.
Well, he's a time expert for FedEx.
Oh, yeah.
A time management expert, right? Remember? And then he goes to it's there. He goes to home, and it's the holidays, and Helen Hunt's in love with him, and she's like, when are you going to take time for me? And the other things are important. Gives him a watch with her picture in it, and there's the clue. And she gives him the watch. That's the middle of Act 1. That's that line up that I talked about. Yeah. And it says, this is about time and things that are really important, that are truly important. Now, he misses that and goes off on this, doesn't turn down the job. He goes off on some crazy, got to go across the Pacific thing to handle something for FedEx, even though it's the holidays. And you think, well, if he had his priorities straight, maybe he could actually get him to send somebody else, But he doesn't. So he is reluctantly, I'd say, thrown out of his kind of safe but hectic flying around the world existence, and literally into the Pacific. Floating in the Pacific and floating up to an island. So, he was kind of reluctant to go on the trip, but he didn't really know what the trip was going to entail and what it was going to get him into.
Right.
So he's in a new world.
What character? I don't know why this popped into my mind, but What role would you say Wilson played in that film?
Wilson is a reminder of what is truly valuable in life. He doesn't have anyone to talk to. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have anyone to comfort him. He doesn't have anyone to love him. He left all that behind, mm-hmm. And he willfully, maybe subconsciously, he didn't really realize what he was doing, mm-hmm. but it certainly comes to consciousness when, he creates Wilson, and Wilson, he's talking to him all the time, and you see how much he's changed emotionally and how much human contact means to him when he loses Wilson and Wilson drifts off and he can't swim away from the raft and get Wilson and stay on the raft and live. Yeah,
that was a sad scene.
Yeah, I know. But you know that. But when they rewrote that script about 35 times. Okay. Yeah. That's fairly common in big movies to rewrite it a lot. So you know that he's changed when you see that scene, and you know that he's going to be different if he makes it, if he gets back home. You know that he's going to be different with people because his heart is all over. It's not just on his sleeve; it's all over his body when he loses Wilson. So you have a transformed human being.
Yeah. That was one. My other favorite hero story is Tom Hanks also in Joe versus the Volcano.
Yeah, that's a crazy movie.
I love that movie.
Yeah, that was really a nutty movie. It was early on too. It was kind of a flop, but it still was really tons of fun. That's a hero in a world sort of out of control. It's kind of a farce. Yeah.
And he didn't really change, did he? Because at the end she's saying, "You're always going to do this, aren't you?"
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's comedies. That's Hollywood comedies for you. The comedians, although lately in the past 10 years or so, Hollywood comedies have a serious third act. And I don't know that you could compare that to the return home kind of thing in the Campbell structure. Okay. Because like at Night at the Museum with Ben Stiller, it gets kind of serious because he's really got to impress his kid, and he's apparently screwed up. He can't even be a night watchman at a museum without messing that up, So, but then he turns it all around, and he actually wins the respect of his child and therefore of other people around him. So he's got that elixir that he wanted, and it didn't come in a way that he expected, but it did come,
Yeah. Well.
So in the story structure that I teach, the second act is the first one. Is the first line up in the second act is a kind of road of trials. It's an uphill struggle. The hero is learning all the rules of this new world that he or she is in. And it's hard to learn the rules and win the battle. And then in the middle of the second act, they reach a decision point, which I call a leap of faith. And I forget the Campbell corollary of it, but this is where they have to sort of tap into the intuition thing. Mm-hmm. They have to tap into that greater force. Luke Skywalker has got to raise the plane out of the swamp with his mind, in the second movie. That kind of thing. And it's a real test, and it's where the inner battle is waged, and it's your chance to win it. And the hero has to win the inner battle. They have to take this leap of faith and trust the broader universe God or whatever, that they're going to come out okay. And then they've got a chance to win the final battle. And in Castaway, we don't actually see Tom Hanks do this, but we learn what it is later when he's building the raft, and he needs one more piece of rope, and there's no more vines around. He's like, oh no, I can't put, remember that? And so where does he get it? He goes to the top of the mountain, and we see that he was going to hang himself because he couldn't stand it. He was going to kill himself, and he gets that rope, and it's a real chilling moment. But you realize that in the middle of the story, he was going to kill himself, but he decided against it. He won the inner battle, right? And by winning the inner battle, he has a chance. He doesn't have certainty, but he has a chance to win the greater battle for everyone else. And so Hanks gets the rope, and he goes and he puts it on the raft, and he's got that porta potty sail, you know.
Yeah.
And porta potty door sail, and he gets over the reef, and he's out to sea, you know. So then that's a line down. Once he's won the leap of faith, here at the top of the leap of faith, you know, he's won this, and then it's all downhill, and it's sort of like the world or the universe is saying, you know, hey, let's see how good you are, you know, now you're Mr. Hero, you know, now that you've got all these new skills and all that sort of stuff, let's see how good we're going to give you a real battle to test you. And that happens in the Campbell structure very much, and that's the end of the second act when that comes. It's James Bond used to get into that all the time. You know, he'd get captured by the villain. Yeah. And you knew the movie. You know what I mean? Remember that? So I call that part the deepest dilemma. And a lot of people in trying to have entrepreneurial success, it's astonishing if you look into their stories. How often they had a business going along, and some, or even a venture, they were building it, they were trying to get capital or something like that, and then they discover that it looks like everything is going to fall apart. They think they're all prepared, and it looks like everything is going to fall apart, but they just keep going, and because of the preparation and the road of trials, you could call it, and how they've survived on the road trials, and because of conquering any inner wound or problem they've had, they're then able to go on and win that final battle, you know, which is, and then there's the fifth line, and it's straight up, you know, and sometimes it's in movies, sometimes it's resolved very quickly, like in the first Men in Black movie. Tommy Lee Jones tells that big bug creature thing. I don't know if you saw that or you remember that. Yeah, he's you know, that creature eats the gun that will kill it. So Tommy Lee Jones says, eat me, you know, and so the bug goes, well, okay, you know, and Will Smith is like, what do I do now? And so Tommy Lee Jones literally goes into the belly of the beast, which is a Campbell thing, grabs the gun and blows the thing apart, you know? And so that's about as deep a dilemma as you're going to get when you're inside this giant bug creature, you know? You know?
A little hard to suspend disbelief on that one.
Yeah, I know. But, you know, hey, if you believe Jonah and the whale in the Bible, you know, I guess it can happen. You know, and there's been people that have been cut out of pythons and survived.
That's true.
You know,
that's true.
You know,
they have. That's true.
Yeah, not me, but you know, don't want to try it. But
I would think those digestive juices might be a little tough.
Yeah. Might be bad. So anyway, so then, you know, once they've conquered the deepest dilemma, then they go they rise, and that's the fifth line of the bull market of the Elliott wave, and it ties right into Campbell's structure, and they take the prize home. They win the battle, and Tom Hanks doesn't get the apparent prize that he started out with in Castaway. He doesn't get Helen Hunt. Too bad. She still loves him, but she's got a baby and a good husband. Mm-hmm. And so, he's learned his lesson about what matters, and use your time wisely while you have it, and value the people that matter.
And it implied that he got that other girl.
Yeah, I thought that the girl, the redhead, I thought she was fantastic. And you got to remember, he delivered a package, somebody in Russia, where he went initially to consult them on time management. Someone from that Russian office delivered the package from that girl to her cheating husband in Russia. So it would have been fantastic justice if Tom Hanks had gotten together with her. And I remember at the end of the movie, I'm kind of a romantic, and so he goes and he drives off the crossroads, and he's just standing there, and I'm going, "Go back, you idiot!"
I'm sure he did.
Yeah, I think he did too. Yeah. If they ever had a sequel to Castaway, they'd have to start out with him driving back to see her, I think. So, or maybe they've been together and they're, they both get Castaway. Yeah. So anyway, but these stories, there's a real pattern in the world. There's a pattern. There are patterns, but there's probably a major pattern on how a lot of things work. And one thing that I incorporated into my Pepperdine lecture was that once I put together the Elliott wave and Hero with 1,000 Faces, poetics, Shakespeare structure, it has this up and down movement to it, And a year after I started on this, some scientists were able to take a atomic microscope picture of a wave of light, which was the first time anyone had taken a picture of it, and it had exactly the same pattern.
Wow.
The wave of light had the same pattern.
It's probably a universality that we haven't, it's been there the whole time.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that when people go on these heroic journeys, a lot of people, the bucket list, that was real popular. Yeah. And I remember when it was first going around, people were going, well, no, who wants to see a couple of old guys, blah, 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 blah. But I said, no, it's going to be a huge hit, because this is one of the things that people think about, the things that they did not accomplish in their life, that they did not try. The places.
For so many people, that's writing a book. So I think that any way we can help them do that.
Absolutely.
That's my...
Absolutely. You got, it's like, the whole thing about, what is the British Secret Service, I think, or not the Secret Service, the SAS, right? Uh-huh. Their thing is, he who dares wins.
Yeah.
And I think Goethe there's a statement about boldness, with Campbell's thing, although the heroes that he studied and that he mentions were always reluctant once they were in the mix, once they were in the hero's journey. They really didn't flinch much. They didn't like some of the things they had to go through, but they kept going forward. And I think if you can get enough people to get this idea of if you'll go forward, if you have the guts to leave the common world and do something new and bold, you might fail, but if you don't, it might eat at you, so by the time you're 60, 65, 70, you're going to be going, gosh, I wish I'd done this, it's or people think about old boyfriends, old girlfriends that they want to go see, that they, well, I wonder what happened to her, I wonder what happened to him. How did they turn out? What if I'd married Joe? That kind of thing.
Kubler-Ross said that that's one of the worst things for people facing their death is knowing that they didn't do the one thing that they most wanted to do in life.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you have to do that. I wrote a thing for somebody's blog the other day, and it was advice to young writers. And my basic statement was, whenever I started out, I knew I was going to be a writer from the time I was 6 years old, and I had barrier after barrier. I had a 5th grade teacher who wouldn't let me turn in a 12-page poem I wrote about the charge of the Confederate General Pickett at the Battle of Gettysburg. It was just this total suicide charge, but for some reason I wanted to write about that. And the reason I wrote so many pages was because I just got into it and I just kept going, and I wanted an A+. I didn't want an A. I was told by my 4th grade teacher that if you do a little more, you get an A+. If you do just the assignment the way I said, then you get an A. So I wanted an A+. Well, the teacher wouldn't let me turn it in. So she said it would embarrass the other kids, And then I know it's terrible. And the first time I ever sang on stage was at the same school, and I sang Don't Fence Me In, And I was, how old was I? Maybe I was 10. And people just laughed uproariously because I was off key and, all that. Later in high school, I was a freshman in high school, I sang on stage in a variety show and just cracked the audience up because my voice was changing. I sang Bane, And once when I won a bunch of money on a game show in 1977, and I was able to sort of begin my writing career by not doing anything for a year, but just pursuing my writing. And during that time, I had a single apartment, and I papered one wall with rejection slips that I got from publishers. And later I wrote it.
Do you have any pictures of yourself in that room with the wall?
No, I should. I wish I did. Later I wrote a one-act play that took place in that apartment, and when we put it on stage, I used my own real rejection letters to paper the wall on stage. And then the lead actor one day he went, God, these are yours. People rejecting you. And I said, yeah, that's kind of wild. And he says, well, why am I doing your play if you're this bad? And I said, I don't know. Why are you? He said, well, you've improved.
You improved. And that's how you improve. Like you said, just keep going forward.
Absolutely. Keep going forward and try to learn. You got to learn how structure works. And if you read The Hero with 1,000 Faces and Aristotle's Poetics, anything you can get your hands on that's about workable structure, it's used over and over and over. And the good writers are constantly studying it. And people who, I was editing a book for a CEO one time who had a big software company, and he was talking about story structure and comparing it to real life. So top business people study this stuff too, So it really pays to look into it.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Skip, for being on this program. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been fun.
And I'll be uploading this to YouTube, and if that's okay.
Absolutely, sure.
Okay.
Let me know when I can see it. I'll tell people about it.
Okay, and I'll let you know when I'm going to be broadcasting it too, so you can ask them to watch the broadcast.
I absolutely will.
Okay,
So thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun.
Thanks.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Yeah, bye.